Scratch, an online, block-based coding website. Me, an undeterrable genius. In order to prove my superior intellect, I have challenged myself to learn Scratch in just 7 days. So I began the week by simply opening Scratch and beginning a new project. I understood it immediately.
When Bert is clicked.
Okay, so maybe not quite immediately, but over the 2-hour period, I began to learn some basic features.
Then how do I make him move? Oh, because it's not connected to anything.
And thus, I began feeling pretty good. Yeah, there was some more complex stuff to figure out, but it really couldn't be that hard.
Incentivize an idea of trapped feelingness.
Before we get to that, however, we probably should lay out exactly what it is I'm trying to accomplish here. So I wrote out 5 criteria that my little project here should meet by the end of the week. What am I doing to myself? Criteria 1. A functional way to lose. A core tenet of any good game is that you can lose. A little hurdle to make winning that much more desirable. Largely, I want to make it so that when Zeb here touches little Corennial here, that the player will fall over and a little dialogue will screen before the game ends. Simple and easy to research. I think this is probably both the most essential and one of the easiest to accomplish. Criteria 2. Multiple levels. Something that I struggled with particularly was the backdrops. Switching between them, sprites, where to use what and when. Particularly how to get the player from one place to another without messing all the scripts up. Fairly simple, again, and one I think I understand the basics of already. It's more how to integrate it within the wider gameplay loop that is, ironically, throwing me for a loop. Criteria 3. Customization. One of my favourite parts of games is their customization. This can range from simple colour sliders to more complex changes such as size and clothing. I'd like to perhaps have it change size and or colour, but I'm not sure yet. Now, I think looking at this may be the easiest one of the bunch to complete, as I've already utilised costumes for staging, but I couldn't really figure out how to switch between them this time. Criteria 4. Looping. Something I cannot figure out is the looping blocks. I'm not sure why, but whenever I try to loop the actions taken by Zeb, I cannot figure it out. This is frustrating because if Zeb is going to work at all, it needs to loop. In hindsight, I sound really stupid here. I imagine this one might just be going over my head, and I'll figure it out later without any major interference, but it also may not, which is why I have it here. Criteria 5. A mute button. I did not think this would be a criteria, but here we are. The problem here is that while, yes, I can make a button that cancels the volume, I cannot make that same button bring back the volume. I figure it has something to do with the if-else blocks, but there seems to me not to be any practical way to accomplish this. While perhaps not the easiest, I do think that all these are reasonably achievable by the end of the week, which bodes well, because it's actually 6 days. The first thing I began to do on this day was research, particularly watching tutorial videos and beginner's guides for Scratch. I think I should say this now, but thank you to Griffpatch, because he consistently had a tutorial for some of the most particular questions I had. So thank you very much. My strategy here was to watch some tutorials, ponder about for a few hours, and then see what I could implement. And oh no, I've retained sweet nothing. So this forced me to go a little more traditional and begin following tutorials as I watched them. I decided to focus on my first criteria for today, losing. In actuality, it is fairly simple, only requiring a little more knowledge than I had already. Using the broadcast blocks, I could create things that I had largely overcomplicated in the past. The problem with the simple methods is that they didn't consistently run each check. So while you'd almost always lose, and the game would usually register it as such, if you moved at the right time, it would keep playing and simply appear as though you had died. So the game wouldn't reset. But using a method that was slightly more complicated, while perhaps not boding well for the end of the week, does in fact fix most of this issue. Most. What we are working on today is how to create multiple levels, or just expand upon existing ones. The basic method to do something akin to this so far has been utilizing the when sprite is touched, do X. But this is very limited and requires player interaction that is both unnecessary and would potentially allow them to skip entire sections of the game. The first method that I'd learned on how to deal with this was using an invisible sprite to instead have when player sprite touches the invisible sprite, do X. This, while on its own not a complete solution, did provide a basis for how to work around the web of code that was required to make the other solution work. The next thing I needed was a map to test this on.
Purple floors, yes, oh, purple, oh, yep, purple jump platforms, yep, oh, more purple, yep, oh, a wall, ooh, walls, yes, oh, yeah, ooh.
Well, this works pretty well, and it doesn't appear to be ridiculously difficult to extend this to the enemy. We'll get to you soon, Zeb, don't worry. While this works for the sake of extending existing levels, to create new levels, we're going to need conditions for this sprite to appear. The first option is to consider, if our objective is simply to survive, then we could reasonably ask, how long? And simply enter the answer in a wait block. Okay, don't worry, the concept is sound, and I found the issue right here. But on later levels, I would like it if we could utilize additional conditions. Like for example, it would be nice if we could have Perennial need to collect an item on each stage before the invisible sprite appears. Alternatively, we could just force the player to make Zeb trigger the sprite. However, this may end up beyond my scope, and I found it difficult to implement it consistently. Even if it would fix this issue really easily. No, this doesn't upset me in the slightest. Why do you ask? Another teensy tiny aspect that I haven't mentioned yet. Don't worry, it isn't such a big deal. But I have literally no idea how to reset the position of Zeb. Which means that a poor switch of locations means an instant loss. But it could be worse. I don't know how, but I'm pretty sure it could be worse. Quick, to the next day! The second easiest criteria on my list. Customization. Second only to the mute button. Right? Wrong! This is the single worst idea I have ever had. The idea was simple. Make a couple of different sprites, give them the same code as Perennial, the player sprite, and then I believe the difficult part would be finding a way to switch between them. Which yes, that took a little while. But you know something I forgot about? How, in this beautiful, cursed world, am I supposed to deactivate them? Instead, you go through the menu, select your character, and then begin the game. Yeah, this is a minor problem. Normally in this situation, I'd go for a tutorial. But either this week has made me substantially worse at using search engines, or this is an entirely unsolvable problem that nobody has ever solved. A hypothetical third option would be that I'm just stupid, but that couldn't be true.
Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It's echoey in here. I hope that doesn't come through. Anyway, I'm on the cusp of 400 subscribers. So look, just please, I'll do something. I'll do something like 400 seconds to do something. I'll figure it out. Yeah, subscribe.
An idea that I began experimenting with was having a base hitbox sprite and having sprites connect to that for customization. Which, aside from some minor missteps, I began making progress. While this is fairly basic, it was mostly easy to transfer it onto other, more complex customizations. Now, you may be asking, hey, Mizzerius, you made a real big deal about this not 5 sentences ago. Now you're telling us about this simple solution. This is the easiest one. You're just baiting us. Wrong again! I haven't told you about the hard part yet. How is this game supposed to remember what you've chosen? While I have learned how to make Scratch perform consistent checks, I haven't yet learned how to have it remember the previous actions and stick to previous choices. This is the hitch that's making it ridiculously difficult to give players the customization that I want. And I don't really know how to fix that. Yeah, there are some tutorials on how to make a basic memory system, like how to remember what level you're on, stuff like that, you know? Nothing applicable to my situation, and it isn't like I could just apply that logic and simply switch the focus. It's so absurd, who would even try? Huh. As I said earlier, one of the easiest criteria on my list, if not the easiest. Oh, you want a yellow player? Pfft, don't even worry about it. Oh, you want rainbow hair? Not even a singular problem. No, but seriously, I spent hours of my life on this, and it was the first thing that came up. I am the epitome of human intellect. For my customization, I found it easiest to have a base character and give 3 to 5 separate pieces that can be changed. That is because the pressing of these buttons, for me, is fairly important to allow the game to remember these changes, as I have the changes connected both to these along with the sprites themselves. The primary problem with customization is that it creates a large amount of complication, particularly in increased assets, especially for otherwise simplistic projects. Alternatively, you could consider it a fairly simple way for a new developer to try out further complications. But again, this is me, and who wants to learn? Cringe. The first of 2 factors preventing me from mastering Scratch is looping. So far, while I've been programming a basic game on Scratch, after about 30 seconds to a minute, it screeches to a halt as Zeb, the enemy, stops moving forever. Now, I'm sure if you've used Scratch for more than a cumulative week, like I now have, this may sound a little silly. Just a little. Basically, if you're not familiar, there is this coding block in Scratch, known as the forever block. Probably it says forever on it, so I'm guessing that's what it's known as, which runs the code in it forever. It was there the whole time. Now, when I first ran into the block, I did not know how to use it. Don't make fun of me, alright? How was I supposed to know that replacing the repeat block with the forever block would make it run forever rather than a repeat? Okay, maybe I should have known that. Regardless, after 4 days of trying to find a way to make that work, I just did this. You see, you take this out here, and then you slide this in here. Yep, this was what I considered a hard level difficulty. This is what makes it to the end. But don't worry, I'm sure the last thing I wrote on this list is really gonna justify my troubles to this point, and this video as a whole. This is a worthwhile video. Anyways, while the criteria is technically mute button, it is really about how to unmute once the game's already been muted. Because muting is very, very easy. Just connect a button to a block that sets the sound to 0, and BAM! Now the game is forever muted and I can do nothing about it. What I need to do is have the game run a check on whether the volume is muted or not. Now you may be asking, well, why don't you just add a second button that makes the volume go back up? Well, that's because I didn't think of that, okay? Something that's becoming increasingly evident through this series is, as I've learned Scratch and the basics, it's only getting increasingly difficult to have long-winded explanations of what are fairly simple codes, like look at this. How am I supposed to spend 5 minutes justifying why I thought this was the crucial 1 of 5 piece that I really needed to learn? Well, okay, that may take longer to justify, but the primary problem was that I didn't know how to use the equations that go here. Otherwise, this is insanely simple. So, that's that. I learned everything. I can make I'm just kidding. Of course I needed to prove my value. And what better way to do that than repeating what started the week? A 1-hour session where I try to make the best Scratch game that I can. At about 11:30 PM, I began the challenge. Now, we're going to compare my first Scratch game and my end of week game. So, this is the game that I created at the start of the week. Fairly basic, and Zeb can probably never catch Perennial because he has a tiny hitbox and can only attack twice, and it has to be after he's completed that run cycle. So this is basically a completely safe game. You basically cannot die. And here's the final project. It's definitely a more complex game than before, and look! There's solid surfaces! And multiple backgrounds! Wow. Nintendo who? Miyamoto is quaking in his boots, afraid of when Mizzerius enters the market. Haha! Oh, be afraid! It still is a little easy to evade Zeb, though. But that would be fairly easily solvable in later levels by adding more of them. In fact...
What's that? Oh. You know, there are 5 Zebs. That's what's important. Yeah! Yeah, look at them! Look, they can't catch me because I'm just so good at this game. No, okay, nope, not quite, not quite.
But we can go further.
Okay, we have 20 Zebs in it. Okay, I see maybe there's some problems here, maybe a little bit. It doesn't really negated this strategy. Oh!
But we can go even further.
Okay, we're back. There is 100 Zebs, all separated by 0.5. Let's see. Okay, oh, what? My controls aren't working. Oh, nope, okay. Works this time. You know, oh, okay. So yes, going back does in fact reset them, so maybe if we just try and take the widest possible angle without doing that. Oh, well. Okay. I think I'm still gonna disappear.
Alright, I concede, I yield. So, anyway, how did I do on my criteria? More than 50%! I win!